Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students, today we will discuss Longinus as a critic. So here I must quote Alexander Pope, who paid very rich tribute to Longinus. He says, "Thee bore Longinus, all the nine inspire, and bless their critic with the poet's fire, an ardent judge, who zealous in his trust, with warmth gives sentence, yet is always just, whose own example strengthens all his laws, and is himself that great sublime he draws." As a critic, so Longinus displays a rare breadth and catholicity of outlook and a mind disinterested and free from prejudice. His estimates are essentially just and have been upheld by posterity. Now let us discuss the salient features of his contribution to literary criticism. First of all, as a practical critic, his practical criticism is illuminating, interesting, and original. We find him as a practical critic covering three literatures: Greek, Roman, and Hebrew literature, where for the first time, with certain limitations, we find the critical judgments of outstanding quality. As a practical critic, there are three aspects of Longinus: his use of aesthetic tests, his use of historical method, and his use of comparative method. Now, his use of aesthetic tastes means here he has pointed out the artistic qualities or the intrinsic qualities for which any work can be great. Here he forms his critical judgment of different authors based on aesthetic taste. He quotes Homer's descriptions of a storm where the most terrifying circumstances have been shown: the swift onrush of the waves lifted high and sullen by the tempest, the black overwhelming clouds, the mad seas breaking and shrouding the ship in foam, the winds howling in the sails, and the sailors terror-stricken, conscious of the near approach of death. Then he gives Sappho's Ode to Anactoria, commenting on the choice of the most striking symptoms of the love passion, vehement, contradictory, and realistic as she shows different moods. Longinus explains that in each case it is the overwhelming imaginative appeal, the exhilarating, the awe-inspiring grandeur, their beauty or terror that calls the attention of the reader. Here Longinus, through hinting at the artistic beauty, language, imagination, enthusiasm, makes his critical judgments aesthetic in nature. B. His use of historical method. His criticism affords an early, though imperfect, instance of historical criticism which later on yielded valuable results. His observations on Odyssey and Iliad are very interesting, where he praises Iliad for such merits as being full of dramatic action and conflict, treated with energy and never failing greatness, and in a style impatient and supple and packed with images from actual life. The Odyssey, on the other hand, is described as lacking in most of these qualities, with numerous character sketches and a host of foolish fables of the most trifling kind. He says that Homer wrote Odyssey when his powers were in decline. And now the C, his use of comparative method. His use of comparative method is very important. His arguments in the comparative study of writers are reinforced by means of a wider outlook because he had studied the Hebrew, the Greek, and the Roman literatures. This method aims at bringing out the salient characteristics of different writers, as Demosthenes and Plato, Demosthenes and Cicero, Demosthenes and Hyperides, Plato and Lysias, and classical Greek and Alexandrian poets. This study and his consequent remarks show a very great critic at work. And Longinus as a judicial critic. As a judicial critic also, Longinus ranks very high. He approaches his task unhampered by rules and with a mind disinterested and free from prejudice. His verdicts are always free from dogmatism and pedantry. His judgments, which aim at interpreting literary values, are very important. His commentary on Homer is very illuminating. In this commentary, he succeeds in communicating his feelings to his readers. Longinus stands high as judicial critic because he takes account of three separate literatures. Lastly, his anticipation of modern criticism is very significant. And now his originality. The commonplace and familiar nature of his remarks and ideas apart, he is an original critic in many respects. Number one, the treatment of the subjects, the new outlook he affords on literary questions, and the permanent value and universality of many of his utterances, his importance attached to imagination, his beauty of words, the aesthetic appreciation of literature, his advocacy of return to the standards, and above all, the spirit of the classical Greek, his keen vision, penetrating insight into the nature and functioning of the literary art, his conception that literary art is not only a craft, but the thing of the spirit also. So this is all about his originality, and he seems not to have copied any other writer. And the last thing, that his influence. And we know that Longinus' influence has been very deep. A widely read critic in the 18th century. After Boileau's translation of On the Sublime, his work became almost the Bible of the neoclassicists. His precepts won him great applause and esteem in the 18th century. Literary figures like Dryden, John Dennis, Addison, Pope, Sir Joshua Reynolds, and Burke all admired and followed him. Nowadays, the supreme qualities of his work are no longer in question. The 20th century has great regard for Longinus because he anticipated much that is modern in critical work, and because he is a great original critic. Thank you very much.